When I first came across the brand Tsarbomba, I made a couple of assumptions about them. In fact, I made two assumptions that have turned out to be very, very wrong. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. And the first thing was my confusion about the name of the brand, Tsarbomba. And I now understand why I had some confusion about the brand name. It's because the company, it has a base in LA in the United States, but the watches are made in China, but the brand itself sells the watches in authorized dealers and in boutiques across Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and it's named after a thermonuclear bomb, a bomb that was made in Russia. Tsarbomba loosely translate in Russia to Emperor of Bombs. So there's a bit of confusion, at least what was in my mind about the name, but now that I sort of understand why they've chosen this name, because of the idea of the technology that was behind that thermonuclear evolution, I start to sort of understand a little bit more about this brand. And the second thing that I was a bit confused about was the quality of the watches. Sometimes when I see these styles of watches, my mind goes straight to thinking that they are more affordably made watches. And that was completely wrong in regards to these watches, because as soon as I got hands-on with this Reactor series, I didn't think it was a budget-made watch. I didn't think it was a well-made watch. I thought this watch is one of the best-made watches that I've experienced. So I was wrong about the name, and I was wrong about my assumption about what quality these watches were going to be. Now, I've had this feeling a couple of times from a couple of different brands, and it's the same thought, and it's the same feel that I get from this watch. And that is that when I look at the price of this watch, and I feel this watch in my hand and on my wrist, I keep thinking, how is it only this amount of money? I've experienced a lot of watches, affordable watches, mid-range watches, luxury watches, but rarely do I get this feeling. And this is what I'm getting from this watch, because it's not a specifically cheap watch. This is just over $1,000 Australian dollars, but in my mind, when I look at it, when I feel it, when I have this one on my wrist, I keep thinking it's a $5,000 watch. And I'm saying that for a couple of different reasons, partly because of the design and the details, but it really is the feel and the quality and the finishing on this watch. Now, you may have seen that sponsored icon pop up before, and that is because Tsarbomba reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to feature one of our watches? And those two assumptions came into my mind, but I'm so glad that I chose to ignore them, because as I've mentioned, those assumptions were completely wrong, because this watch is not only good, it's absolutely incredible. Now, I chose to go with the silver and blue variations, but if you have a look on their website, you'll see not only are there other sort of color combinations of this particular watch with straps and bits and pieces, but there's also carbon fiber or carbon designed cases, gold colored cases, silver cases, and this particular watch, it even has it in the name that is interchangeable, is because you can customize this watch with different bezels and different crowns, and of course different straps too. And although I do like the idea behind this interchangeability of this watch, this customization you can do as the watch purchaser, as me, the one owning the watch and loving the watch, that's actually not what has stood out to me. Although it's very cool and I like the idea of it and it gives us options as watch consumers, it's the design of this one that has captured my attention and definitely been then backed up by a really high quality watch, which makes it feel like something rather special when it's on my wrist. And as you look at the package and how it's presented, you should know that this is an automatic watch. It is a Japanese powered watch. It has 50 meters of water resistance. It has this custom sapphire crystal on it, and it has an FKM rubber strap. As I said, it comes with a standard color, or you can choose your own different variation if you want. And there is some assembly required. It actually comes with the crown not attached, with the strap not attached, with the bezel not attached, so you then put them together. It only takes a few seconds to do. It's very quick and easy. And as you can see now, I just press these two buttons on the side and you can just pop that bezel straight off. When you look at the strap and see the custom trigger there, the little button, you can push that and take the strap off too and change that out. In fact, this mechanism to change the strap is probably the easiest and nicest mechanism that I've come across with an interchangeable strap option, which is why I think they're leaning into this interchangeability and they're putting some design and technology into this feature of this watch. But as you look at this watch, you're probably going to be asking me a question. You're probably going to be asking, how do you tell the time on this watch? Because it is a very different way of telling time. They've taken a automatic mechanical movement, they've made some adjustments to it, and they've thought outside the box. And I like when watch brands think outside the box because it becomes a little bit more interesting. And this one, initially I thought was a weird way of telling the time, or maybe even a hard way of telling the time, but it is absolutely incredible how quickly it became so natural to be able to tell the time. In fact, it became easy to tell the time in almost two different ways. Because as you look at the lower part of that dial, you'll see that hour hand that swings around. One has a 0, then a 3, then a 6, and a 9. But then below that, you'll see a sort of semicircle of numbers, 0 all the way up to 3. And the way that you tell the time, or at least the first part of the way that you tell the time, is you take that number on the hour hand and you add it to the number that is below. Now that gives you an approximate time. And quite often that's all I do to look at the time, especially if those numbers are lining up. You can see very quickly what the hour is or how close it is to the half an hour. But of course, to know the exact time, you look into the top part of this dial where you'll see that moving semicircle of minute numbers. And you'll see that tiny little arrow will be pointed directly at a minute number. So now you look at the bottom half, you get an idea what the hour is and the approximate hour sort of time period. You look at the top and you get the exact minute, and then you have a center moving second hand, which actually has marks on there so you can tell the exact time if you really want to, but they've done it in a way that for me is more of a moving visual element, but is just still something you can use if you want to tell the exact time or set this watch exactly to the hour. And it has been really interesting, really after 3 days on wrist, I hardly ever then look up at that minute track. I'm looking down at that bottom, I can see an approximation of a time. It's really only if that hour hand is right in the middle of the other numbers that I then look up and see the exact number. Because if they're lining up on the hour or very close to it, you pretty much know exactly what the time is. It's then only confirmation looking up at that minute track to see the exact time to the minute. Now there's a lot going on this dial, and I'm going to try my best to sort of work my way down, maybe from top to bottom, to really identify what is happening. Because at the very top you'll see that the name Tsarbomba is printed on in black, and it's on a material that has this almost sand-blasted look, and you'll see there's a couple of little 3D effects to it, and this effect is then mirrored on those little side sort of sections there that are also stepped down, but they both have that silver sort of sandblasted type of effect. Underneath the logo of the Tsarbomba, you'll see in this sort of dark blue, almost grey, is that minute track, and that minute track does move with the movement. Below that is this big U-shaped piece of steel, and this U-shaped piece of steel has a couple of finishes on it. On the very top there, you'll see that it is a vertical brushing. On the little chamfers that then lead down to that second track, it's polished. But then on the underside, it's almost mimicking that sandblast effect of that other surface. So you've got these 3 surfaces on that particular interesting sort of U-shaped section there. It then mimics that other sort of surface that's behind it and above it, but then it has reflection to it because of that brushed when you hit it at the right light. And then you get that little sparkle from those little chamfered polished edges as well. So not only is it really nice when this watch catches the light with all those different surface types, but the details and the 3D effect and the layering of this dial, before I even get to the lower half of this dial, is already enough to capture my attention and draw that attention into it. Because then as you drop below that to where that hour hand is, you'll see the hour hand itself has a multiple colors to it, and below it is this circular or almost sort of like Morse code style sort of 3D effect. It sort of looks like a semicircle that has been divided and overlapped, and it really gives a really interesting depth effect to this dial. And then when it goes onto the very lower section where it has the numbers written, it has a sort of concave working its way up to the base of the dial, and then when you look really close, you'll see there is some striation patterns into that, which again capture the light. This watch, I think, is not only about the design, but it's also about the details. The design initially grabs your attention, but it's the details and the quality of those details and the quality of the finishing of those details that then draw you in. This watch not only captures my attention, it holds my attention. Now, when you first look at this watch, you may be thinking it is form over function, and that's probably what I thought initially, but very quickly that changes. This watch I find very easy to tell the time, and that continues when you turn the light out because there is some lume. This more works in a way that I find that gives you an approximate time rather than an exact time, but it is there, that is usable, and it's all that I need when the lights get turned out. Now, that sapphire crystal that covers that dial must have a heap of AR coating because it pretty much disappears. And obviously this is not a standard sapphire crystal that you could buy off the shelf. This is custom made for this specific watch that fits into this specific dial, and it has this really interesting curve that follows the form of the watch. And that's surrounded by that interchangeable bezel. This silver bezel, which has both chamfered polished edges and brushing, is the standard one that comes with this particular colorway, and it is the one that I would have chosen anyway. But if you want to dress this watch up or dress this watch down or have a little bit of fun with it, you can buy some of those optional accessory bezels and you can switch them out, and they're really easy to switch out just by pressing those two buttons on either side of the case. Now, this one I think is powered by one of the 8000 series Miyota movements, which for me, my initial thought is that those are more affordable watch movements, and this watch might be too expensive for that movement, but I made a realization, and I made a realization because this watch has a different way of telling the time, and there's something that I've noticed. Whenever I've seen a watch that is doing something different, that is modifying a movement to tell time in a different way, they always use this base movement. So obviously this movement must be the movement that is used when you are doing these interesting changes and modifications to the time telling aspect, because I've seen many, many more expensive watches like the Mad 1 utilizing the same movement because I think it is the right movement when you're doing things like this. And being a Miyota movement, it does have hacking and hand winding. And you can take this crown off and put a different crown on if you want. And you might think that that rubber strap is a little bit in the way if you want to adjust the time or if you want to wind the watch. And I haven't found that personally, but with the interchangeability of the strap in such an easy way by just pressing a button, if you really felt that it was in the way, it literally takes half a second to take that strap off and then put it back on again. So you can still then access that crown up at the 12 o'clock. Now I want to show you this case, first of all, on my wrist. And I want to show you how it is sitting down on wrist, how much it hugs me and it sort of curves around onto wrist. And that not only makes it comfortable, but it also makes the watch then fit my wrist better because it is a rather large watch. Because the case itself, from left to right, overlapping those buttons on the side of the case, is 46.8 millimeters. The height of the watch, or the thickness, is 13.9 millimeters. The lug to lug of the steel section of the watch is 52.8 millimeters. And the next thing, which I'm going to circle back to, is the effective lug with the rubber strap is 66 millimeters. I'll talk more about that later. And something that's very interesting is the lug width is different from top to bottom. The top lug is 25.5 and the bottom lug is 22 millimeters. And it weighs 137 grams with that integrated strap. And it's not a strap that you are going to be changing out. It is part of the watch. It's part of the form as well as the function, but I'll come back to that again a little bit later because I want to now talk about the case. And it's the case, for me, that gives me this luxury feel, because it's not only the sort of quality of it, it's just how they've put it together, because this is a skeletonized case, which whenever I've felt and handled a skeletonized case, there's generally some little sharp bits or even slightly sharp bits on the inside of those skeletonized parts of the case. This one, not at all. It is perfectly finished on every edge. This has such a lovely in-hand, on-wrist feel that it makes me just think it is a luxury watch. And it's obviously a thought out design as well, because there is some nice mixtures of polishing and brushing as well. Even those trigger buttons on the sides to release the bezel have an integrated finish in there which captures the light. This watch not only captures your attention, but it captures the light, and I think this watch just captures everything. And that's one of the reasons why I like this one so much. All these small details that have been integrated into the design and the form that just keep me entertained and keep me drawn into this watch. Which then actually rather surprises me when I turn the watch over, that it is actually a very simple case back, which I guess it doesn't need much more. There is so many sort of features of this watch already, but you can see that it has the Tsarbomba logo, tells you that it is all stainless steel, has 100 meters of water resistance, Japanese movement, and that sapphire crystal. But let's talk about this strap, and let's talk about this strap in a couple of different ways. Let's first of all talk about how it attaches to the case with these triggers. This I thought would be an interesting feature, but I didn't quite realize just how easy it is to use. In fact, this is the easiest attachment technology that I've ever used on any watch. Even quick release spring bars aren't anywhere near as close or as easy to use as these ones. There is no pressing the button then trying to find the holes of the case. No, it's press the buttons, push it in, let go of the button, it's in. And I think it works that way because you can see that the strap has been integrated into the case. It's designed for this watch. It's not an afterthought. It's part of the design of the specific watch. And it certainly feels like something special. It is the nicest feeling rubber strap that I've ever experienced. And I love the color as well. It definitely suits this watch. And of course you can swap it out with other colors if you chose to do that. And then of course it also leads onto a very nicely finished buckle and tang. But let's talk about that effective lug to lug with this integrated rubber strap because it does make it big. I have a 17 centimeter wrist or around about 6 3/4, and it is pushing the limits of my wrist. I think with the design of the case itself, there's no problems with the size of the watch, but having this integrated rubber strap does push the boundaries out. Now I've been wearing this watch almost every minute of every day since this one arrived, so I've obviously been okay with wearing it, but it is pushing the limits of my wrist size. And it's actually the only sort of comment that I'm gonna make about this watch to the company, because this watch has been sold as something that is customizable, that is interchangeable. I would love to see Tsarbomba make a strap specifically for this watch for slightly smaller wrists. If you're going to be able to change out and customize this watch, why not have a customization for slightly smaller wristed people? And I want to say something further about this watch, something that I think I really want to sort of drive home, because you're not likely to be able to see this one in real life before thinking about possibly purchasing it. And I'm going to say it in the best way that I can, because I buy lots of watches. I get discounts on some watches, I get the occasional free watches, but I put them into sort of 3 categories. Watches that are short-term in my watch collection, medium to long-term in my collection, and virtually forever watches in my collection. Watches that I love so much that they stay long-term or forever, and there's only a few that really are in that category. This watch is now in this category and it's staying with me. Yes, this was a sponsored video. This watch was given to me for free, but let me tell you right now, this watch is staying in my collection. I like it that much. Not only does it feel great, not only does it look great, but I just really connect with it and it gives me so much enjoyment. I love this. And if you're thinking 1,000 Australian dollars might be a lot of money for a watch, well, it is. But this watch feels like a much more expensive watch. And if it's too much for you to spend on a watch, perhaps you could mix it in with an upcoming event. I tend to do this sometimes with watches where I've got a birthday coming up, or if it's Christmas or an anniversary, I then go, well, maybe part of that anniversary money or that Christmas money or that birthday money or that Valentine's Day gift money can go towards a watch. And this would be the watch that would be on my list. Thanks very much for watching. I do appreciate it. Maybe watch a couple of my other videos next.